Good evening and welcome to Tambuli xChange. I am Jerry Kleachko, the Dean of the School of Communication of the University of Asia and the Pacific and the organizer of the Asia Pacific Tambuli Awards, an initiative of the UAMP School of Communication. As most of you might know, the Asia Pacific Tambuli Awards is an annual advertising award show that recognizes marketing campaigns that exemplify creativity, brand purpose, and effectiveness. And like most advertising award shows around the world, we were unable to hold a live conference and show for 2020 due to the global pandemic. And in lieu of the live conference and show, tonight we bring you the inaugural edition of Tambuli xChange, an online forum on brand creativity, effectiveness, and purpose, inspiring brands to create change, to uplift lives of people, and make a difference in society. The latest issue of The Economist, June 27, 2020, reports that with this pandemic, quote, a reshaped advertising world is emerging. Tonight's forum can hopefully shed some light as our panel tackles the question, is 2020 time to reset brand creativity and purpose? Well, joining us in the panel this evening are 4 brilliant and multi-awarded global chief creative officers and who are also past jury presidents and chairmen of the Asia Pacific Tambuli Awards. Live from New York are Matt Eastwood, the Global Chief Creative Officer of McCann Health, and Ronald, the Global Chief Creative Officer of Isobar. From Mumbai, we have Josy, the Chairman and Chief Creative Officer of BBDO India. And from London, Malcolm Poynton, the Global Chief Creative Officer of Cheil Worldwide. Malcolm will also serve as the moderator for this session. So welcome, Matt, Ronald, Josy, and Malcolm.
Thanks, Jerry. And a huge welcome to everyone tuning in to this Tambuli xChange session today. As Jerry said, is 2020 time to reset brand creativity and purpose is what we're going to be talking about. Perhaps the most exciting topic of our industry right now, and one that impacts all of us, both client side, agency side, as well as universities.
Good morning.
And who's coming into
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear you, Malcolm.
Great. Okay. So before we get into the discussion today, just Josy, Matt, Ronald, just briefly, how are you and your families? And given we're all from different corners of the world, how is the mood in your home country right now? I'm curious to know.
The U.S. is deep in a bit crazy, lucky, and that
Matt, you're lagging.
In me, or you can.
I think Ronald, why don't you jump in while we see if we can resolve what's going on with Matt's signal?
Yeah. Can you hear me clearly, guys? Hi. Hey.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Pleasure to join this conversation. Well, how are things here? Things are a bit crazy, to be honest. There's a lot of flux. The year started off as a challenging year, and then without any notice or heads up, we got COVID. So that sort of put everyone in a tailspin. And then now, rightfully, the conversation about racial injustice is going on. So a lot of activity going on this year, but I think what's important is that is activity that's long overdue. That needs to be had. So it's definitely never a dull moment in the US. But back closer to home, I am very fortunate to not be living in the city. Sort of holed up in an apartment. I live in a suburb called Summit in New Jersey. So having a little bit of space, or more like my kids have a bit of space from me. So trying to keep sane and safe.
That's great. Matt, you're back.
Yes, I don't know what happened there. Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah,
how
good.
are you? You all well? And what's the mood like?
Yeah, I mean, as Ronald just said, New York is challenging. It's I think probably of all the US states, New York is doing better, which is great, but it's certainly not over in the US. But I was very lucky. My husband and I have a house upstate New York, about 2.5 hours out of New York, so we sort of disappeared up here about 3 months ago now, and we're in the country, which is great, and so it's we're all safe, and my family is all back home in Australia, and they're all actually doing incredibly well. So we've been counting our blessings.
Good to hear. Josy, how about you?
Well, I mean, we're all going through changes, right? I mean, it's such a vulnerable time for people like us, especially in Mumbai. My parents live close by, but I can't see them. It's been 3 months. My son is in New York. He's living in the city, Union Square. So I live with anxiety all the time. But I think the whole distraction of work, the ability to break away and live an alternate life through your own creative energy allows you to break out of those anxieties and those vulnerabilities. So I keep saying the only way out of the COVID blues is your own inner rock and roll. So that's how I try to survive.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, such complicated, interesting times. And it seems these unreal times call for some real change. So let's start at the start. COVID-19 became big news, certainly for me back in January while I was in Seoul. But it was February and March in many countries where it obviously became something overnight, as we've just heard. It happened faster than any of us could blink, perhaps not in the UK, but pretty much everywhere else. I had to unexpectedly fly back to New Zealand for personal reasons. By the time I landed there, they had isolation in place and the country went into lockdown. But what happened next that I saw was Nike came out of the blocks super early with a global campaign before the US had even really heard about it as a virus, and I love the way Nike landed so clearly, so quickly, the message that many governments missed in this communication, play inside, play for the world. And they said to consumers what needed to be said. And they also made it, that their online training programs were free for a few months. So I'm curious to hear from all of you, what brand really stood out when you think back to the beginning of when the pandemic kicked off? What messaging and what actions really stood out for you? Perhaps Josy, do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I saw a lot of confusion all around, brands trying to align with what governments were saying. So they were saying almost the same thing, and there was no differentiation. But then I saw this piece of work from Facebook, which said we are never lost if we can find each other. And there was so much beauty and optimism and poetry in that, I remember the first time I saw it, I wept. And it was part of Facebook's community tool dedicated to COVID-19 to help people who need help during the coronavirus pandemic. So for me, that was one of the early pieces. It was a message and there was a bit of action.
Yeah, and Kate Tempest, who the poet behind that is a renowned British poet. She's fantastic, isn't she? And I think those words were very, very moving for all of us, probably, I would say. Yeah. Matt, how about you?
I mean, there was a lot of work, I think, at the very beginning that was quite similar to each other and similar messaging about social distancing, etc. But I think the first thing I saw that really kind of stood out for me was, not surprisingly, was for Dove out of Canada. And they did just a fantastic spot, which under the guise of courage is beautiful. and they just showed photographs of first responders at the end of a hard day with their mask on or off and the marks on their faces, etc. And they, it was just such a wonderful celebration of what we all were feeling at that time, of like this absolute gratitude towards all the first responders who were, helping us and sacrificing their own safety and on the front lines. And I think, Dove also did put action behind it, which was really smart, in that they were donating products to all the first responders to try and make their lives a little bit easier. So I loved the fact that the message was really positive, and to Josy's point, it uplifted you at a time when you really needed it, but it was also supported by brand action, which I think has become more and more important, as opposed to just messages that say we're in it with you.
Yes, for sure. And Ronald, what stood out to you?
Yeah, as we know, China is one of the first countries to be hit by this crisis. And, something that I was really proud of to see our client in China, KFC, do. Right at the beginning, they kept 6 restaurants in Wuhan open to serve free meals to medical staff at the hospital. So very, very, very early, in this crisis, they already sort of actioned, on how they can help the first responders, and introducing work like contactless delivery in mid-February. So very early in the game, with where delivery was done, and with each delivery, you actually could see the temperature reading of the person who packed the food, including the person who delivered the food, just to reassure people that they will be safe as they order their food. So all part of digitalization and the e-commerce platform that the brand has created. So very, very early in the game, ready for the crisis. But I just want to call out one piece that was not created by the industry, created by students. I don't know if you guys have seen the Netflix spoiler billboard work, which was a spec work, but I thought it was really, really beautiful and gave me hope, right? Because students are our next generation, and seeing that, put a smile on our face at a moment that was all about seriousness and about being very thoughtful. This was thoughtful in a different way. I really like that. Kudos to those students.
Yeah, and there's a clear theme there, isn't there, in terms of what you've all identified. A crisis is not a spectator sport. It's brands who take action that are actually really fulfilling that void and that need at that time, and action that's true to who they are and what they do as a brand, whether that's Facebook connecting people or indeed whether that's Dove in terms of seeing, courage as beauty, or KFC going that extra step to make sure they're supporting the people who are doing the frontline work there in Wuhan. And it kind of makes me think, as the now pandemic rolls on, and every day we wake up to more news of it rolling on and second waves coming back and more cases being found and so forth. Governments, they seem to have not been so clear and consistent in their messaging. And I think I'm certainly acutely aware of that right now in the UK, where I think the government's been mocked daily for changing their point of view on stay at home, go to work, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, stay alone, meet people, all these sorts of things, social distance, don't social distance. So in the, with that kind of context, do you think brands can credibly also do things to fill that space and make things better for people, more clear in what the messaging needs to be?
Yeah, absolutely. It was we have a client, Reckitt Benckiser, and at the very beginning, we recognized that was happening, and there was so much misinformation, and the government, certainly the US government, was slow to act, and some didn't believe it was actually going to happen. But we worked with that client, and we started a campaign called Spread Facts, Not Fear. And it was really about just making sure that people had a credible place to come for information. Reckitt Benckiser is the brand behind Lysol and Dettol and brands like that. So I think they had the credibility. Those brands were in people's cupboards at the time, so it felt right for them. But they brought together a whole lot of experts like Johns Hopkins University, the World Health Organization, etc., and we put that into a website, COVID-19 Facts, and actually it became a very credible place for people to go along with the CDC website to find out what actually they should do. And I think it's great for brands. It's sad that governments can't play that role and be so succinct as that. But I think the beauty is that's what we do as, in marketing. We are about simplifying the message and making sure that it's well understood. So we're used to that kind of brevity and simplicity and authenticity. And brands have been doing it since quite well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can add to that, Malcolm, great question. People are definitely looking to brands to lead. I recently saw an Edelman survey, which said 3 out of 4 people feel that brand CEOs should take the lead on changing, what is not right, and not wait for the government. I think that's very, very telling right now. And if you look at in the last week, brands like Ben & Jerry's, Verizon, North Face, have just stood up and said, if Facebook doesn't, block hateful content, we're just going to stop advertising. And that's such a powerful message. And I think about 100 brands have already, come out and said, we got to make a stand on this issue. So I think the power of brands has never been more important or more powerful than at this moment. And it's really where brands and what people seek from brands today align, right? For so many years, it feels like brands and what people want are disjointed and not meeting in the middle. I feel that at this moment, brands are really waking up and really understanding and listening to what society wants and delivering on those promises.
So just taking off from there, I think brands and governments lost an opportunity, and it's not that everything is lost, but I think everyone worked in isolation, which I think is a bit like the past. This was the time for governments and brands to come together and create some sort of organized, integrated effort where the government says, this is what we do, and you brands, each of you do it this way. And there could have been a central orchestration that allowed brands to have a purpose and the government to orchestrate it, or the other way around. So I think brands began to look at themselves as isolated sort of beings, and I think we lost that opportunity. But I think going forward, there is an opportunity here to create orchestration so that brands can work together, each standing for what they stand for, but doing it as a collective clarity.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic. And I noticed, as I said, I was locked down in New Zealand. The government there, I think, were fantastic at being scavengers. They got information from every source globally they could. And they also used academics locally who had a different point of view, perhaps, than the government to form their official line and make decisions as to where they go. Off the back of that, though, I think I've noticed there's a lot going on in consumer behavior, which is kind of saying, well, just give us the facts, get out of the way with all your kind of typical brand communications, give us the facts. And if it's not the facts, just fulfill the order that I want fulfilled really quickly as you can. I want it tomorrow. So what do you think in terms of, the brand as we refer to it? Is it even relevant to consumers at this time?
I think more relevant than ever before, and it will be 10 times more relevant, moving forward. I mean, let's go back 2-3 months. I think at that time when everyone was having a war about toilet paper, you just picked whatever was available, right?
Yeah.
If you ordered, I don't care what brand it was, I just wanted those 6 rolls, right? It was ridiculous. But as the sort of a production supply is coming back and things are going a bit back to normal, people are going to have to pick and choose, right? And there are many reasons for that. People are sort of getting back their sanity. And there's a very real problem right now where, people are dealing with job loss. People are dealing with pay cuts and, overall less spending power. So as they do that, they really are going to start to rethink what are the brands that they choose And then, emotionally, what are the brands they want to align with? Do those brands align with their beliefs, and are those brands with a slightly limited amount of money? How do I make sure that I pick the right brands for my family? So I think the power of the brand is really going to rise up right now, as we balance that with limited spending power.
Yeah,
I think people are going to be judging them. Sorry, Josy, go.
Thank you. I'm just building on what Ronald said, because we have a retail client, and it's very interesting. They said that in the first month or so, everybody was into commodity. Just get us this. Just get us the bread. Just get us the things for our daily sort of necessities. And as the weeks went by, our retail client found a new voice coming in, which is, okay, can you also get us that particular exclusive thing? And can you also get us that particular brand? And by the third month, it was all about, hey, this is what I love, and can you stock that? So it's very interesting how the curve went. One from my immediate necessity, don't give a damn about the brand, just a commodity, to no, now I want what I want.
Yeah, and so I think where we're going so far is, we know we've touched on the point that a crisis is not a time for a brand to be a spectator. Brands really need to step up and take action. And I think we're starting to hear that brands are probably more important than ever in terms of filling voids that governments perhaps aren't filling. And now when people may have less spending power, the brand becomes more important. And I think we're seeing throughout this period a lot of data being called into question. It's either old before it's new, or it's flawed before it's even found. And so the trust that we have in government messaging is perhaps not what it could be. But that means, I guess, that, brand trust has never been more important. And Steve Jobs was known to say a brand is simply trust. However, if we look around, I think we're all pretty aware there's a lot of brands that we could point to that, for one reason or another, have really never focused on their reason to being, but really focused on the quick sale and maximizing profits. So, categories, I think, like fashion, food, automotive, they all kind of leap out to me as categories with brands who are guilty of that. But do you see the pandemic, I wonder, as providing brands with an opportunity to reestablish their purpose, or even establish their purpose if they didn't really have one, so that they align their values now with the world of a more conscious and perhaps more frugal post-COVID consumer?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for me, one of the interesting things is I think brands now are being judged by how they have and behaved through this pandemic, and how they continue to behave. And I think that will hang around for quite a long time. McCann has a philosophy of find the meaningful role for your brand in consumers' lives. And I think that that to me is now more important than ever. Consumers are not interested in brands that are opportunistic and seeing this as an opportunity to, just push their products. It has to be supported by action. It's important, not just what you say, but what you do. And brands, in the US, like Ford, who got on board very quickly and started building ventilators for the US government, that's going to go a long way when we come out the other side. And I think, more importantly, people don't want brands just to add to the noise. There's so many messages out there. There's so much noise. And if that's your only purpose is to come out and just add to it, then people are going to turn away very, very quickly. And the other thing that I love that's happening right now, and Josy sort of touched on it, is brands are very actively listening to what their customers want. So they are, and they're pivoting quite quickly. And I think many of our clients have surprised themselves at how quickly they can adjust the way they market their products, even to the new needs of clients. Particularly for me, as I work in the health space, this is a health crisis. And if you think about people that are in any kind of disease state, the ones that are most vulnerable are the people that are undergoing chemotherapy or diabetics, etc. So the brands have had to pivot very quickly to offer them safety and a way to continue their medication. because you can't just stop. So I've been really impressed by that brand behavior, and I think the ones that don't do it are the ones that will suffer in the long term.
Yeah.
Should I just continue on that? Because, you mentioned, Malcolm, that Jobs said a brand is simply trust. And we know the ultimate trust is a mother-baby relationship. So I'm straying away a bit here. But the core of motherhood is unconditional love, generosity, selflessness, and sacrifice. And brands will have to give to receive. An example in India, the Tata's famous company did
Yes.
something immediately, They opened all the hotels and turned them into hospitals. Not too many companies can do that, right? And I think that giving they will receive, and trust is an X factor. It is that extra. And now is the time for brands to do that little more.
Yeah, I mean, I think this seems like an obvious thing in many ways when you couch it like that both of you have. And it's something that I certainly think and hope we see a lot more. I think right at the beginning we called out Nike, opening up their digital platforms for training so people could exercise at home and do things that they couldn't. And that means in a digital world, things may be changing as well. And I guess that, it's a lot easier for digital products and services to perhaps reach people at this time and to be put in front of people, perhaps to help build trust. But it also seems that we've had a period of time where things that are digital are very cold and very techy, and it's always about a user experience. And COVID seems to have forced everything to be digital these days, from how you connect with grandparents and childcare to your IT support and entertainment. Do you think that maybe the empathy that we're seeing come into society because of COVID will give rise to a more kind of human digital approach to tech-centered ideas? And I'm conscious we've got a chicken on a slide, which isn't very human, but I think back to when Burger King Subservient Chicken launched. I mean, the beauty of this was it was digital, but didn't feel digital. It was hugely entertaining and hugely human. And I'm kind of wondering, what do you see coming in front of us in terms of where digital products and services and communications might fall as a result of the empathy we're seeing sparked in societies today?
Malcolm, I think the key word you called out was human. Everything is digital today, right?
Yeah.
You just can't escape it. Even my 80-year-old mother cannot escape digital. As much as I found it challenging to get her on Zoom, she cannot avoid it, right? But I think what's important is, for digital and technology to sort of take a back seat, but, blend into our lives, right? I mean, the reason VR is beautiful, but the reason VR has not taken off in a big way is you have to wear those big fucking, things over your face, right? I think the moment we can make digital and technology transparent, and sort of be oxygen, that's when digital is really, really going to be like, part of humanity. We talk so much about augmenting reality and augmenting technology. I think we really need to look at technology as augmenting humanity. I mean, just one piece I want to call out from our Dutch office. We did a piece of work called VW for Volkswagen Road Tales. I mean, the whole idea of 7 out of 10 kids being addicted to their phones when they're in the back seat, right? So, if you're a parent, it's worrying because you don't want your kids to be just addicted to the phones, but you still have to focus on the road. So how do you do this all the time, right?
Hopefully you don't do that all the time.
Exactly, right? So you're resigned to the fact of them looking at their phone. I mean, we created an idea where we created audio stories which were location based, but ultimately what it was a mobile based idea that took the child's attention away from the mobile phone. So it's using technology to sort of put technology in the backseat, right? I mean, yeah, sorry, punny, but
in a very human way, by the sound of it, yeah.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
That I think is as our roles, as brands and agencies. How can we use technology to augment humanity, but not get in the way of our lives?
But have you guys heard people say that? I mean, for me, one of the biggest surprises is how connected I've felt over video.
Yeah.
I really didn't expect to feel that intimacy on a video call, and I think we're all feeling it. Is like, well, that's a surprise, and we're all, it's a little bit exhausting because it's very intense. But it's also interesting, again, coming back to working in health. The obvious move for health has been telemedicine and telehealth, and doctors talking to patients over video. And the surprise has been that a lot of doctors hadn't really done it yet. It was a service that was available, and they hadn't really experienced it. And a lot of patients the same. A lot of patients just didn't think, well, how can I have a doctor's appointment over a computer? Seems crazy. It's interesting. I had an appointment myself just to sort of see what it was like. And the crazy thing is that there is this incredible intimacy between you and your doctor, because you are literally staring at each other, which is very different to when you're normally in a doctor's surgery and they're looking over here, tapping away on their computer, taking notes, etc., not really engaging with you. So the surprise has been how video, I think, and the digital pathway has really connected people in a more intimate way than they ever have before. And I think for me, that's where there are so many creative opportunities of how can you take that and embed that technology and that idea into other ways of purchasing. For instance, cars. That could be an interesting way to move into a virtual showroom when you don't really have to go out and test drive the car anymore. You can have a virtual test drive and you can talk to the dealer, etc. So, that's a big change that I don't think people will give up the minute this is over. I think they'll expect it to continue on.
Yeah, and I think in a work from home experience, we're all experiencing that, aren't we, Josy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point you made about intense personal experience, right? It's intensifying it further. And we always say that social distance does not mean emotional distance, right?
Yeah.
And I think the digital experience has increased that sentiment, It's like you can feel the sentiment a little more. It's like the stock market. It's almost like the sentiment of those feelings are being enhanced. You may not have the physical thing, but sentiment is there. It's like the digital interface is the stock market of humanity, sort of,
Yeah,
and it's strange when someone calls you with a normal phone call. You're like,
yes,
what's going on? I can't see
it is
you.
very strange. And I think we're starting to understand how to use it differently, aren't we? I know for me personally, I do a lot of projects with distributed creators around the world, and a bit like Study Buddy that kids use for studying. I don't know if you know about that as a platform, but we'll leave the video link open for 4 hours and kind of do check-ins every hour. You're not talking and facing the camera the whole time, but there's a connection and you can feel that you're connected still.
Yeah.
And it's a different way of using the platform. We don't have to just phone someone to go face-to-face talk for 5 minutes. In a way, you can use these platforms differently. And I think, as was brought up earlier, in terms of brands listening, it kind of feels like there's more opportunities through technology, perhaps, for brands to behave differently. I'm referring here to the fact that pre-pandemic, we saw some pretty serious disruption happening in long-established categories, like beauty and automotive. So when Rihanna launched Fenty in 2018 with the purpose of catering to all shades of skin, from albino to dark-skinned black colors, and Elon Musk launched Tesla with the reality of electric cars that people had only dreamed of, that we were seeing disruption like we hadn't seen before. And do you think disruptive innovation is the reality for brands post-COVID if they're going to stay relevant to the consumer mindset?
Absolutely, Malcolm. I think if brands don't if they haven't already very quickly look at themselves in the mirror and understand if they should disrupt themselves first, I think they're going to be disrupted very badly. Whether the reason for disrupting your business model is to defend your business, to create a new revenue stream, or just to expand into a new realm, I think it's absolutely important. I have a very simple sort of example. Just look at the richest guy in the world. Jeff Bezos. I mean, how did he start with? He started selling books out of his garage. And look at where he is today, right? Groceries, Amazon Fresh. He bought Whole Foods. He's into entertainment. He's with Prime Video and gaming with Twitch, voice, Alexa, and now a monopoly on web services. It looks nothing like what they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, that's a great example of a brand just constantly sort of disrupting itself and finding new sort of defense modes, right? So that no one can sort of create some sort of an offensive move against them.
Yeah.
I also think, so some of the language, maybe not disruption, but what we've been saying to a lot of our clients, it's a chance to reimagine. When you re-enter, when we come back out of this, it is an opportunity to reimagine how your brand comes out again. And I think that is proving to be quite exciting for brands, because they can look at the landscape and go, you know what, people accepted that change incredibly quickly. So why don't we take that on and reimagine how we take our brand to market? And I think a lot of brands I can see are doing that right now, and that is fantastic, because I think, to your point, Ronald, that's pivoting when you need to pivot, and being able to do that. And actually, it's funny, often when you talk to clients and you use language like disruption in the past, it kind of scares them a little bit, and they're like, oh, that's not really us, and But I think when you talk about let's reimagine, it's exciting, and there's opportunity of how you can take your brand forward. So I think it's going to be a great moment coming out the other side to see what brands look like and how they behave now.
Just adding to that, for me, I'll introduce another word, which is, if it's disruption, it is what you said, Matt, reimagine, but it's also breaking down. It's the whole, everything's breaking, right? Because of it, because of what we're going through. And I think there is an opportunity here because of your own vulnerability and because of brands being vulnerable, for brands to break down and reimagine, as you said, themselves. And we spoke about, or at least I do speak about Fair and Lovely, for example, going through its own changes and dropping Fair from its name. Where that will go, we'll see. But there are so many cases where this time is the right time, because people are more mindful, people are getting more sensitive, and therefore there is a natural breakdown and rearrangement of who you are and what your brand is.
And do you think with that, we're at a time where people are talking already about reimagining, and people have been talking about the new normal, but I think as far as everyone's concerned, we're living the new normal. There's going to be a new normal that comes around the corner. And there's a British artist whose work I love, David Shrigley, and he did something recently, if you can imagine, a crystal ball being held in the hand and someone suggesting drop it. And the other person saying, well, I don't want to drop it. And he's saying, because it'll break. And he's saying, yeah, I want to see it smash. And it kind of feels a bit like that's how consumers are at the moment, looking at brands and looking at the kind of traditional category behavior that we've seen. And we have talked a fair bit about brands, but I wonder how that impacts us and creativity at this time. Do you think the industry needs new skills in creativity at this time?
Malcolm, I'll go first. It's a classical question, right? Whenever there's change, whenever you feel something's happening, we ask this question. Of course, we need new skills, because we sit at the intersection, right, of media, consumer, market, society. So things are changing rapidly across all four. So it will need responses that can't come from the past. What that will be is something that we'll have to live through. I can't say immediately, but yes, we will have to change.
I mean, I think the interesting thing right now is that people have seen quite quickly that change is possible, I think. I mean, because we have changed in such a dramatic way so quickly, I think people are starting to have faith in their ability to change again. And I think, globally right now, we're going through this conversation about, Black Lives Matter and what that means in terms of our industry is really is recruiting new viewpoints and new faces within our community, which we've been incredibly bad at doing. And I think for in the States, the fact that certainly I'm so thrilled to see that I think probably 4 or 5 weeks after the marches started, they're still going every day and every weekend, and people are saying, no, I'm not going to accept that this won't change. And I think the same is true of our of advertising. I think we now feel like the talent market has to change. We have to be more focused on getting more women. We have to be focused on getting more people of color, and that's going to be, that it's not an easy just flick a switch and it happens. It's going to be a systemic change to the way we educate our young people, to the way we offer opportunity to people who don't necessarily have the socioeconomic background to do it. And I think bringing those voices into our industry will definitely change the way our industry works, and we'll change our approach to creativity. We'll change what we say to clients. We'll change their brands. And I think that's a fantastic moment in time. I think that, and it feels for the first time in my lifetime, it feels like this really could be possible. This really could be the moment where it all changed.
Absolutely. I think, Matt, this has to be the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really look beyond traditionally trained spaces to hire, because even if you look at the schools, there's not enough diversity. There is enough gender diversity because we are seeing a higher rate. I mean, we were talking earlier, right, Matt? You were saying that there's definitely a higher level of women in the schools. The problem is the dropout level when they get into the industry.
Yeah,
I think we're not doing enough to support them. We're not doing enough to motivate them to remain and to celebrate what their capabilities are. Which is why you see that it's not a problem at the junior to mid level. It really dips very quickly past that level. So I think it's our responsibility to see how we can support, we can empower, so that we have a future generation of leaders that is, of a better balance.
And do you think that with that, if we're bringing more balance into and more diversity into our leadership, I don't just think perhaps through gender or racial background. I also just think through diversity of thinking and diversity of skills. Is that something that you feel would open up more opportunity for us with our clients? I mean, there are so many agencies who are quite happy to do a very niche and specific thing, which may be building their agency fame out of doing television ads for a client. Or, we've seen some agencies start in the space who only really swim in the social space. But I think with the kinds of problems and challenges that we're seeing and the opportunities for brands to perhaps reimagine, and break themselves down, as you refer to, and come back differently. Do you think maybe as an industry, we'll have an opportunity to get back in a situation that perhaps people of my generation used to look up to, who were solving client, opportunities differently to the narrow space we seem to fall into so often? So diversity of leadership, in theory, it may well open us up as an industry to solve more interesting, more diverse challenges for clients. Is that something that you would see happening as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the challenges is de-risking the hiring of people that maybe don't look like the people that are already in our agencies. Because when you step outside of that, you've got a bunch of people that you need to convince when you're hiring, a 22-year-old person who's not come from a traditional advertising school or something like that. You've got to convince your management team to say, I want to take a chance on this person. And they're like, well, we can't afford to just pay a salary because you want to take a chance. So I think, what I've been trying to do is find ways to de-risk that. And for me, one example is in our London office, we just hired an industrial designer in the creative department, just because he approaches problems in a different way. And we've found a way we've started a program across our agencies called Ignite, which is really about igniting creativity and within people that haven't necessarily thought about advertising as a career. And that allowed me to bring in people that weren't necessarily looking at advertising as a career path. And I think the beauty of that is advertising doesn't look like advertising anymore. Advertising is products, is behaviors, is experiences, is films, it's everything. But I think, for us, we have to take the chance on those people. And I love the quote from Bill Bernbach, which is now probably 50, 60 years old, but he always said, I can't teach talent, but I can teach advertising. And so he was just like, find great talent and then teach them how to work in an advertising agency.
Yeah. I mean, what is our industry's biggest enemy? Vanilla work, right? Doing the same thing over and over again. And, if we don't start to seek for a more diverse kind of skill set, and, I'm talking about a different kind of diversity now, right? A more diverse kind of a skill background, we'll never get to a new kind of diversity in the work, in our creative outcomes, right? So I love what you said, Matt, about the product designer joining your team. I'm seeing, obviously with our data teams, mathematicians, right? And our tech team, scientists joining our teams. I mean, it just immediately opens up doors. When you have designers and scientists and mathematicians talking in the same room, I think the challenge is how do you connect the dots, between the artists and the scientists to create something magical, something that we never thought we could have created 5 years ago. I think that is the opportunity, and as we bring in a new kind of a skill set, that's when we'll see a new kind of work.
So one of the things that I do is I go and speak about leading a creative life in all kinds of schools and colleges. It doesn't have to be related to advertising. It can be anything. And created something called a Groundswell. It's called Groundswell because it doesn't matter where you come from. And through the internet, I have sessions with kids in the most remote part of the country, just to help, myself and them talk about what is creativity and what is creative mentorship. And that's one aspect of experimentation. But there is another one, which is passion point. When somebody comes with a really powerful passion point, he or she comes with a network, and that network is often more intense than the networks that we have in advertising, because they are passion networks. They're not necessarily only guys in advertising. They have their own spread of people around them. And when they come in, the sound changes. And that network is also something we want to promote.
Yeah, Josy, I love that. And I think, it leads me to something which I know the University of Asia Pacific do quite differently, which is they have a belief in educating the whole person. And I think so many universities are very, subject related and just specialized in one space, whereas they don't go broad across the liberal arts. And it really is a question. I'm wondering, does recruitment need a reset at this time too? We see some projects and progress like D&AD Shift, which your only criteria is that you don't have a tertiary education to apply to D&AD Shift. And I'm wondering, what changes would you like to see in perhaps how the universities are bringing people through courses related to our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think more than ever, we have to start working closely with our education institutions and people like D&AD Shift. And, we can't sit back and just wait for them to bring the people that we want. We have to be very active in finding those people. I think the lovely thing about Shift, and something I've felt for a while in our industry, is, creative departments sort of, not totally, but became a bit of a rich kids place. People who had the money to go to certain schools, to Miami Ad School or whatever, they were the ones that go through and they end up in creative departments. but I want to hear the voices of people that don't necessarily come from that socioeconomic background. And that's not as easy as just saying, well, let's drag them in. There are huge implications in that, and funding and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's where we have to work with our universities to find ways of reaching those people, as Josy said, and creating that groundswell and bringing in voices that aren't, it's not even a question of gender, or, as you said, Malcolm, or gender or color, or it's a question of economic resources. And I think those people will bring a point of view that we haven't heard before.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it kind of definitely confirms what I believe to be true, is that, we do need more diversity of thinking. And I think given that, post-COVID, brands will need way more creativity than just putting a shiny image in the next social post. Right now, where would you look to recruit from next?
I can go. I mean, I was literally talking about this with my global head of talent, Nick, last week. I mean, we obviously will continue to recruit from the design schools and art schools, but we talked about reaching out to the inner city design schools, inner city art schools, which I thought was really interesting, and it was something that the group had been doing in the past, but has sort of like dropped out of the radar. But I think that is going to open up a new kind of a talent that I'm really looking forward to. So, in the inner city colleges is where we're looking at beyond the traditional spaces.
Yeah, and look, we've been talking to, I guess, groups that understand storytelling.
We seem to have lost you, Matt. Josy, do you want to jump in while Matt's reconnecting?
Yeah, so for me, it's still work in progress. Like I said, I'm reaching out. I've found some amazing foundations that are going deep into smaller towns and smaller places in the country. And we've been having this conversations. People are not ready yet, but so it's work in progress. But it's there. It's in our minds. We want to do it. We want those voices, as Matt said. And so we're actively searching.
And do you think, there was a time in the industry where there were many people who've come through the industry from starting out in the mailroom all the way to founding their own agency, becoming chief creative officers, or indeed, CEOs of agencies. Do you think there is an opportunity through this, and through perhaps even before hiring, Josy, to your point of connecting to, high school leaving sort of generation as well, to bring awareness to what our industry is in the first place, so that, there may be an opportunity for people to come in at that younger level, learn the industry and grow up in it, rather than grow up in a institutional education.
Yeah, I mean, great point, Malcolm. I mean, we've seen so many sort of successful creatives who started in the mailroom, right? And we talked a lot about us reaching out and seeking for new talent. I would also, invite, the younger generation, the new talent, even if you're not in the industry, to reach out to us. Just write to us, call us, pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got something to show you. Even if you're not from the Miami Ad School, or you're not from the Creative Circus, or wherever those schools are, reach out, because we're always looking for fresh talent. That's what I'll say. Please reach out to us.
One of the interesting things I've found, and obviously I've spent my whole career not working in health, and now the last 18 months I'm working in health. And when I joined, my CEO said to me, I was like, I don't have any health experience. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And he said, no, we don't want that. We want someone who understands creativity and ideas, and you can learn the health stuff. And that's true. I mean, I'm surrounded by all these doctors. It's fine. But what I've discovered is, and the reason I was attracted to it is back to where we began. It's this idea of purpose and meaning. I'm working on brands that have such a meaningful, life-changing role in people's lives. And so now I'm in this position where I'm almost like a kid in a candy store running around telling young students or graduates or millennials or whoever, that I think something like health for me is a place where you can make a difference in people's lives every day. That's what you do. And that's really what they want. So I think for me, I found a way to kind of draw them in because of the difference they can make in people's lives, and then they can learn whatever they need to learn. And I'm sort of living proof of that. I didn't know any more about health than anyone else, but I know what a great idea is, and I know how I can use creativity to solve a problem.
Exactly. Well, look, I think on that note, if nothing else, COVID-19 certainly testing our industry, isn't it? And the brands we work with. So, if we were to give the industry a scorecard so far, Ronald, what would you say out of 10? How are we doing?
I'll say we're not doing good enough. I'll give us a 6. I think we need to not evolutionize. We need to revolutionize. And I think we're being challenged by the creativity that's coming from our clients also, which is really, really strong. We talked about GM creating ventilators, Coke creating test tubes, LVMH creating sanitizers early in the game. I mean, all that was done by the businesses.
Yes.
So I mean, that's the benchmark, and that's the speed of change that we need to be used to, and that's the new normal. So I'll say 6.
Josy, what do you give us?
I do feel this is the time for transformation, and the world is telling us to change. And we seem to be still going very linear. We still seem to be evolving gently. It's not a break. Maybe I'm expecting too much of myself, to be honest. I would give myself a 4, and therefore the industry a 4.
And Matt, how about you?
I'm going to be a slightly more optimistic. I'm going to give us a 7, because I think I know we have many systemic issues within our industry, but I also think that some of the amazing things that I've seen agencies and clients do together during this period gives me so much hope for the future. So I think agencies have responded really, really well.
So we're at time, and I've got a very few quick fire questions for you guys. Then just a simple yes/no answer, and that way we'll cover off also some of the questions that have come in on the feed during this conversation. So, Matt, mask, no mask?
Mask.
Ronald?
Yes, absolutely yes, please.
Josy?
Yeah, absolutely yes.
Okay. Back the other way, Josy, Zoom calls or travel to meetings?
Don't know. I'm caught in between.
Ronald?
Travel to Zoom calls.
Yeah, exactly. Travel from my kitchen to Zoom calls. Amen.
I'm loving Zoom. Well, Teams.
Controversial one. If you could live anywhere today, would you prefer to be in the East or the West right now, given what's going on?
That is controversial.
Matt.
I love where I am.
Yeah.
Perfect. Right answer. Is not normal the new normal?
Yes.
The new abnormal.
Exactly.
I think the word normal shouldn't be there. There should be no word normal.
So as we set out to answer today, if 2020 is the time to reset brand creativity and purpose, in a word, yes or no, Josy?
Yes.
Ronald?
Absolutely.
Matt?
Yes.
I think we knew that one, didn't we, when we got partway through. Guys, thank you very, very much. It's been fantastic to talk to you all. Great to see your faces again. It's amazing the connection we can have. I know we all know each other through meeting, whenever we can around the world in different places, but it has been really exciting to have that energy on this call together. And thanks to everyone who's been there viewing this as well from the virtual floor. It's been a great discussion, super interesting insights today from, how now is the time for brands to reset for this post-COVID-19 world. Now is the time for brands to find meaning and purpose relevant to the times that we live in. And for brands that, now is the time that you have an opportunity to reimagine and come back in ways as relevant as you can imagine to what the world looks like in this post-COVID situation. And also, I think how creativity is going to be valued, perhaps not in ways that we are used to thinking of it. You know, I think the opportunities are going to go far and wide from today in terms of how creativity can really help shape brands for a better world. And that goes for digital as well, being a whole lot more human, as much as it goes for what we heard today of how we recruit as an industry and how students come into the industry and become students of the industry, perhaps even earlier in their life than what we've seen today. So huge thanks to Tambuli xChange as well, Jerry and the team, for bringing us all together for this great conversation today. It has been really energizing for us, and I imagine it's been energizing for many of you on the other side of the live stream as well. Here's to more exchange sessions to come later. And Jerry, back to you. Cheers for now.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Great. Wow. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Malcolm, Matt, Josy, and Ronald. And that was amazing. So it's a resounding yes. It's 2020 time to reset brand creativity and purpose. We heard from them a resounding yes. And I love the idea of reimagining, breaking down. So to our viewers, I hope that you're bringing with you a few ideas on how you can reimagine brand purpose moving forward. So once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our partners, our agency partner, Dentsu Ages Network, and our technical team powered by Eventscape Manila Eco Channels. And thank you for all your support for the Tambuli Awards. Before we end, I'd like to invite you all to our next Tambuli xChange session, which happens next week on July 7 at 4:30 in the afternoon, on the topic, no budget marketing. That sounds a little exciting. We have 4 chief marketing officers from client companies who will be joining us in the panel. And so I hope you will be able to attend that. Once again, to our viewers and to our panelists, thank you and good evening.